everyone, this is Peak Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be my full-on spoiler review for James Gunn's Superman. And you can check out my non-spoiler review of the movie, and I will leave a link within the description. And this won't be a chronological breakdown of the film, but much more of a highlight of the moments that I thought worked well and the ones that didn't work quite as well within the overall story. So we will start then with the main character himself, Superman of course, and overall, in terms of David Corenswet and his interpretation, I think potentially there was a great modern day Superman in there, but overall the actor was undone by bad writing and material. Now we all know that James Gunn has a preference for what he calls the imposter syndrome, which essentially is a character who is in the lead role as the hero or the leader of the team, but within themselves they don't really see themselves as the main hero of the piece. This character is basically put in the role when he feels he's not ready to fulfill it, that he has to force people to believe and convince in him. And when we look at David Corenswet here, he's far less of a Superman and much more of a Shazam, a kid trapped in a man's body, far less in charge of his own emotions and reactions. And we see this constantly throughout the film where he's having these temper tantrums or outbursts, whether it's that overlong interview scene with Lois, where he's very shouty and showing signs of outrage over her tough questions, the climatic speech at the end of the film that he puts forward to Lex, where he really over-protests about his worthiness as a hero and integrity, and overall it's just too forced and it makes you far less convinced in the character. Now, it was already apparent from the trailers that this Superman was going to be broken down and battered and constantly defeated. This was made very clear throughout the opening scene within the first trailer that was released, which turned out to actually be the opening sequence of the movie, where we see Superman suffering his first loss against the Hammer of Baravia. We see him once more getting weakened by metamorphosed kryptonite powers when he's imprisoned, and he gets beaten once more by the various soldiers of Lex's Planet Watch as he's handed himself in. And again, this is all attempting to make him far more relatable by making him more vulnerable, and I've never been convinced by that. To an extent, we've had this through various iterations that storytellers feel that the only way that they can really make Superman interesting is to make him less powerful or less more competent, and I think that's the wrong way to go, as again it makes you far less convinced in the overall superhero. You want to see Superman challenged, yes, but at the same time he needs to carry a certain strength, a certain awe and power and conviction which makes you believe in him. And despite David Corenswet certainly looking the part, he still has that terrible costume which I still believe is one of the worst live action Superman costumes ever, but I've ranted about that long enough. This just overall isn't the ideal Superman that the character fully deserves. And staying on Superman, we focus then on the story beat that's causing a lot of the outrage, particularly online, and that's a supposed retconning of Superman's Kryptonian parents, who in the beginning of this film Superman refers to in their video message that's spoken in Kryptonian, and him and his robots in the fortress are struggling to fully decrypt it. But somehow Lex, along with his technicians, are able to decode the message, while Superman robots can't. I don't understand why. But it turns out that Superman's original parents actually sent him to Earth to conquer the planet and start a new race of Kryptonians. This, of course, completely conflicts against the original story, where Kal-El parents were more scientists who sent him away to save him from the planet's overall destruction. That tragedy is compounded by the fact that they didn't have enough time to build a ship so they could all go with him. By having this story beat where Superman has been basically ordered or assigned to conquer planets, James Gunn has essentially copied the same storytelling from Invincible, where we deal with the Viltrumites, who as a powerful race are sent all over the universe to conquer planets. We have the same story beats also with Dragon Ball Z, where the Saiyans are dispatched all over the galaxy. Now, whilst I fully understand the purist Superman fan rightly taking issue with this, the movie didn't really do anything substantial with this reveal. Yes, we have the story narrative where Lex puts out the message globally, it's reported all over social media to try and turn the antagonism against Superman, but you don't really feel the weight or impact of this moment. This is partly because, for me personally, I was checked out of the movie, but also because of the movie's erratic pacing where nothing of any note really lands and makes it truly work. Now, overall, this whole retconning was a very bad choice, but it, for me at least, ended up being nothing really truly insignificant, and Superman really forgets about this message at the end of the movie and prefers to refer to the memories of his Earth-based parents. So we'll quickly talk about Krypto, which was easily one of the most annoying parts of this film. Yes, I understand this was an original part of the source material, but let's be honest here, it's not really an integral character within Superman's story. It's not really something that's necessary. Most iterations, whether it's movies, animations, or television, very wisely keep Krypto as a minor token character, a gesture for small moments of comic relief. But Gunn went full tilt here, making Krypto a huge part, which again compounded the overall silliness by having a dog participate with Superman in multiple fight sequences in a large scale, and again undercutting the more powerful essence of Superman himself. Now we fully understand this is partly done as well to appeal to young kids, very much in the same fashion that Baby Yoda was for The Mandalorian, but it just made everything so jokey, including the whole idea of Krypto constantly jumping on people, something that is reused again and again and again, and it just became so tiring. I hated this in the first trailer reveal, which is the movie's opening sequence, but he's constantly doing this over certain characters, and none more annoyingly so at Lex Luthor. After Superman gives his forced speech, we see Krypto grabbing Lex Luthor and then hurling him across the objects. This was a clear recreation of the classic scene in the first Avengers movie, where we see Loki being grabbed and thrown across the room by Hulk. Now that moment was absolutely funny, but it doesn't have the same effect this time around. I just laughed at this scene unintentionally, and I kept thinking that the way that Krypto constantly bashes Lex down with severe intensity, Lex surely would have died or had severe head injuries, but again at this point I really didn't care about what was going on. So we then talk about Lex Luthor and his plans and motivations. Now in terms of all of the technology regarding the interdimensional portals that he used to trap metahumans in this other space, I really wasn't convinced by that setup. Now even though Lex does explain it in a very quick fashion, I just couldn't believe it, even in this wacky story such as this, that Lex could actually harness and develop such advanced technology. And I'd also think that Lex would have even higher aspirations rather than just collecting all of these metahumans and keeping them imprisoned. And remember, this was something that he was doing many years before he actually eventually did it to Superman himself. Now, had they had a story fully developed within this universe, or perhaps some alien tech, for example, the mother boxes that we know from the New Gods and Apocalypse, then that absolutely would have worked if Lex managed to obtain this technology and then used it for his own devices. But the fact that he constructed it on his own, I just didn't buy. There's also the fact that despite cloning Superman that we find out later on in the movie, I did question the fact that he never used that clone to actually trick people into have it masquerade as Superman and then have Superman cause some sort of collateral damage, which would have then turned the public against him. That would have been something far more easier than having to track down the fortress and then this whole elaborate plan of arresting and trapping Superman in a dimensional portal. So why Lex didn't think of this, I just don't know. And unfortunately, Lex as a character became far more ridiculous as the movie went on. He just kept on doing reckless things, whether it was letting loose a massive kaiju within the large populated city, open up the portal that released the dimensional river in the climax, and also later on the black hole. Again, I lost track of these events. They seem to be two separate entities, but I guess they were one and the same. And all of these things just showed Lex as somebody who was completely erratic and all over the place, just going completely out of control. Towards the end, we see him constantly berating and shouting at all of his tech employees, even though they keep telling him the dangers of opening this portal. And Lex just really lost more credibility as the movie continued. And I mentioned in my non-spoiler review that this was far less the fault of Nicholas Hoult and much more a fault of the overall direction and the writing. We then go on to another one of the most unwatchable parts of this movie, and that was the side quest where we go into the dimension. This is where Superman is captured by Lex and put under Metamorpho's kryptonite influences, but in the end he strikes a bargain with him to help rescue Metamorpho's son, who's also captured, if Metamorpho helps him break free. And this sequence was all typical James Gunn in his cosmic mode, as we get all of the pretty pink and purple visuals and slow motion sequences where we see Superman rescuing Metamorpho's son. Again, this was something that was seen in the trailers where we see Superman being repelled, I guess, by all of these tentacles. Again, it was so hazy and erratic, I couldn't make out exactly what was going on. And this was all a completely unnecessary sequence. As where we see Superman and Krypto fighting all of Lex's robots in all of this yellow type lava as they're chasing down, trying to get back to the portal that's been opened, I guess, by both Mr. Terrific and Lois. And this is one of the many examples showcasing just how bad the CGI was. And the sequence was really disorientating and erratic, just loud, and just head-bangingly awful at this point. And it was something that was really symbolic of the film as a whole. So we'll then focus on the Justice Gang, and as I felt when they were first announced, in terms of their involvement within this project, they did turn out to be completely unwarranted, especially in a Superman movie. Also, the fact that this being the first one in your new DC chapter. And this was another indication of the characters that James Gunn really was interested in. None of them, however, truly justified their existence, whether it was Guy Gardner as Green Lantern, who was tolerable, I suppose, in small doses. Hawkgirl was absolutely awful, and she had truly one intolerable moment where she kills the president of Baravia by just dropping him down in the building. Why she had to do that, I'm not sure. And during this sequence, she's just screaming constantly, and again, this was one of the many moments where the film was just giving me absolute severe headache, and it's a clear waste of the very talented and very attractive Isabel Mechad in this particular role. Mr. Terrific himself was okay. I didn't find him quite as standout as what many critics and fans have said, but out of all of the many characters involved here in terms of the Justice Gang, he was probably the best overall, and of the many flaws within the film, he really wasn't one of them. Although he did have another over-the-top erratic sequence where we see him and Lois tracking down the portal that Superman was transported into, and this is where we have that elaborate sequence where we see Mr. Terrific taking out all of the Planet Tech soldiers. Again, this was shown in the trailer. And once more, we have many of these sequences where it's clearly a green screen environment where we see this circular movement in terms of the camera work. And James Gunn, again, being himself, couldn't add a much more of a exciting cinematic soundtrack. Here he needed this glam rock tech type of music, and once more it's just noise without any true excitement or verve or energy. So we then move on to the movie's ending, and this is where Superman fights and defeats Ultraman, which turned out to be a Superman clone. There was much speculation about this, particularly online. Why this couldn't have been Bizarro, I'm not too sure, as is the case with Hammer Baravia, why that couldn't have been Metallo. And this was yet another example of how James Gunn was not utilising characters within Superman's universe and just really instilling the characters that he really was more interested in himself. We see the Justice Gang stopping the second invasion within Baravia. Superman then throws Ultraman into the black hole from what could make it, which traps him in the space permanently. Both he and Mr. Terrific then go on to Luthor Corp and confront Lex, and they end up closing down the black hole. We see Lex attacked by Krypto, as I mentioned before, and then he is eventually arrested. His true activities are exposed to the world through Miss Tessmacher's photos that she sent to Jimmy when it was revealed halfway through the film that they were in some sort of relationship that Jimmy didn't really want to be in. He was just using her to help get any intel on the movements of Lex Luthor. And after these reveals, Superman's image is eventually rebuilt with the public once more, and he then reunites with Lois and they kiss again, as what we've seen in all of the trailers. And following this ending, we will then talk about the first time appearance of Millie Alcock's Supergirl. If you didn't know, Supergirl will be the second cinematic movie within James Gunn's DC chapter, and we see her in this scene when she comes to the fortress reuniting with Krypto, and she's all drunk here, and Superman has to refer to the fact that she's been going around all over planets on these drinking binges. Now, we do know that this Supergirl will be based on Tom King's mini-series called Women of Tomorrow, and if this is the take that they are going with the character, as what we saw in this scene, then God help us all, because already it was truly unbearable just seeing her stumbling like this, calling Superman a bitch. If this is how they're going to go with this character, it's going to be a movie that will prove to be even more unwatchable than this story here, because at the very least, for all of the movie's flaws, I at least liked David Corenswet to a degree in his role as Superman. So there's my thoughts and spoiler feelings on Superman. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you have any other further movies, television series, or any other topics within the pop entertainment and culture scene that you'd like to see me cover within the channel, then also let me know in the comments, and I will see if I can provide further commentary for you on that subject matter within the future. Please also hit and like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide more content for you in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you very, very soon.